Opening credits. Ava and Carol Detective Agency. The Mystery of Solomon's Ring. Chapter 3. Luca.
Okay, I have no idea what just happened, but we need to get back to your mom,
Carol said, her voice sounding strained.
We've got to call the police.
Wait, no. We need to make sure that no one else was in the bookstore. He told me to find Luca,
said Ava urgently. Carol paused.
What do you mean he said find Luca? He never said a word to us.
3 years of taking sign language classes in summer camp? That's how he told me. He told me to find Luca.
Are you sure?
Ava nodded.
I'm sure.
Okay,
Carol reluctantly agreed.
We'll see if anyone else is in there. If not, we go straight to the police.
Ava nodded in agreement, and Carol took a big breath, looking down each end of the alley before they walked toward the door. The girls pulled out their phones and flipped on their flashlights.
Oh, no,
Ava said aloud. The place was a disaster. The yellow walls had marks on them, like things had been thrown at them before they had hit the ground. Tons of books lay on the floor, discarded. Tables were overturned, and a scattering of papers was strewn across the store. Bookshelves had fallen on top of each other, and blank computer screens appeared lifeless from being bashed to the ground. It looked like the place had been hit by a hurricane. Carol walked to the front of the store, looking for Luca or anyone else who might have been caught up in the destructive melee. Suddenly, the lights flashed on, and Carol blinked and staggered backward, momentarily blinded.
Cosa fai?
Came a woman's voice, screaming. Carol hurriedly translated it in her head.
What are you doing?
Che cosa hai fatto al mio negozio?
What have you done to my store?
Carol's hands went up, and her eyes widened as she tried to find her voice amidst the panic.
Mi dispiace, non parlo italiano.
Carol whipped her head around.
Ava,
she called out desperately.
Where are you?
Suddenly a crowd of Italian police officers appeared in the doorway. 2 of them were tall enough to dwarf the girls. Ava raced from between 2 bookshelves to Carol's side. They stood facing 2 officers and a large, squat Italian woman who looked like she could rip a phone book in half. Carol grabbed Ava, pulling her in close, happy to have her friend by her side once again.
Vandals, did you do this?
One of the officers asked roughly in English, his accent thick.
No,
answered Ava. No.
What did you do to my store?
Bellowed the woman as she surveyed the damage, her arms gesturing to the destruction around them.
What did you do to my store?
Ava looked around, thinking fast. She knew she had to tell the truth, but she didn't know how much of the truth to tell. All of it, came the answer in her mind, but Carol had taken the lead already.
Ma'am, please believe us. We did not do this to your store. We're tourists visiting Italy with her mom, Mrs. Clark, who's here for a journalist convention, she said, gesturing to Ava. We were walking by the Arno River when we saw 2 men in a black car grab an old man off the bridge.
She told how they had struck a streetlight and how the man had attempted to escape and had broken into the bookstore to try to hide from the bad guys. The bookshop owner and the police listened intently, nodding during different parts of the story. When Carol got to the part about how they'd heard crashing inside the bookstore after the men had followed their target, the bookshop owner's face twisted up like she had sucked on a lemon. She didn't say anything, though, until Carol finished recounting what had happened.
We were going to run to the hotel to call the police, But we were afraid they may had hurt someone in here,
Carol said, gesturing around.
We knew we weren't supposed to, but the way they treated the old man.
Carol's eyes dropped to the floor.
Bene allora,
said the bookshop owner, studying the girls with quizzical eyes.
It is obvious they are just younger girls and not a part of the damage. Look at their clothes. They did not do this.
The girls felt the policeman's eyes scrutinizing them. Slowly, the expression of the officer in charge softened, and he nodded, letting out a sigh.
Girls, walk me through the story once again.
Wait,
insisted the robust storekeeper.
The girl's mother is probably worried to death. Should we not contact her?
The officer in charge hesitated, then nodded.
Yes, let's do that before their mother calls and reports the girls missing.
The woman grabbed Ava by the hand.
Where are you staying?
The Regis, replied Ava.
And what is your name?
Ava Clark.
And your mother's name?
Beth Clark. The woman nodded and marched forward through the clutter, finally finding the phone buried underneath an upended table. Ava tensed as she heard the woman's voice speak rapidly in Italian. 30 minutes later, the girls sat in the back seat of the police cruiser. They rode in silence all the way back to the hotel, both girls staring out opposite windows. Ava couldn't bring herself to feel bad. She felt like she had done what was right. She replayed the events of the night over and over in her mind, seeing the old man's hand shakily signing the words, "Find Luca." Who was Luca? Was the shop bookstore owner Luca? Did she know Luca? Ava wanted to go back to the bookstore right then and there and look around to see what she could find. She had so many questions. She slowly turned toward Carol. Ava could tell by the way her head hung that her friend was upset. Mrs. Clark was like Carol's second mom, and she knew her mom was going to go ballistic when the girls pulled up in a police cruiser. Ugh, Ava thought, not just a police cruiser, but a police cruiser on their first night in Italy. As they neared the hotel, the girls could see Ava's mom standing outside of the entrance, talking with a security guard. Ava immediately felt a stab of guilt. She didn't want to make her mom worry. Carol felt her throat shrink the moment she saw Mrs. Clark. It was obvious. The woman was furious. "Ava! Carol!" Mrs. Clark shouted when she saw the two approach with the policeman on either side of them. They went to her, and she hugged them, a glint of relief amidst the anger still clear in her eyes. She looked between the men and the girls. "What in the world happened?"
"Ma'am, could we have a word with you?"
the lead officer asked politely.
"Yes, of course. Girls, I want you to go straight into the lobby, find a couch, and do not move from that spot. I'll be in there in just a minute to talk to you about the meaning of not going too far."
"Okay, Mom," Ava said quietly, shame weighing her down. Carol nodded, and they went through the doors. Carol glanced back once, feeling powerless. This was the absolute worst. Not only did they fail to help the mysterious old man, but now Mrs. Clark was upset too. Together they sat on the first couch they found, a gold velvet one with cushions that sunk luxuriously beneath their weight, but not too much. Normally they'd be talking about how it was, without a doubt, the prettiest couch they'd ever sat on that also happened to be comfortable. But they didn't say a word to each other. Despite the excitement of what had happened, the gravity of the situation had settled onto their shoulders, and the events of the night had left them gravely quiet. 5 minutes later, Ava's mom walked in without the policeman. She spotted the girls and went over to them.
"Alrighty then," she said without a smile. "Let's go back to the room." It was a painfully quiet elevator ride. Not even the pretty reflective ceiling of the elevator distracted them. Carol stood in misery. She hated it when adults were upset with her, and Mrs. Clark was one of her favorite grown-ups. Ava felt it too, chewing on the inside of her cheek. The food and tiramisu they'd devoured sat like a rock in her stomach. Finally, they arrived. No sooner did they walk into the hotel room, with the door shutting behind them, did Ava's mom whip around with her hand on her hips, her jaw clenched in anger. "What in the world were you thinking?" she demanded of the girls. "Do you have any idea how dangerous a situation you put yourselves into? And did I not explicitly say that I didn't want you to go far?" "I don't know what explicitly means," Ava said quietly, her eyes downcast. "It means out loud, Ava," Mrs. Clark replied, still fuming. "It means I definitely told you to do the exact opposite of what you did. Do you know how scared I was to come back to the room to find your jackets gone with you nowhere in sight? We're in a different country. I know you're both big on adventures, but this is the kind of adventure that you can't have while it's just me looking out for you. Do I make myself clear, girls?" "But the old man was in trouble," blurted Ava. Carol looked at her, eyes saying, "What are you doing?" But Ava ignored her. "Mom, you have to hear what happened." Mrs. Clark settled back, crossing her arms. "Telling me excuses won't make you any less grounded when we get home, young lady." "Mom, this is important," she implored her. Without waiting another moment, Ava began to describe what had happened. After a while, Carol jumped in too, feeling braver. "We really just wanted to make sure that the old man was okay," Carol insisted at the end of Ava's retelling, her ponytail bobbing up and down as she nodded vehemently. "We stayed hidden until the bad guys were gone. We just wanted to make sure no one was hurt, and then we were going to go straight to the hotel to call the police." Mrs. Clark's eyes flicked back and forth between the girls. Finally, she sighed and hugged them both again, squeezing them tightly. "I'm glad you're both okay," she said, and they hugged her back. Ava sighed. There was no bigger relief than knowing your parents weren't disappointed in you anymore. "And I'm glad you both have such courageous big hearts. But you have to promise me not to do anything like that again, okay? Call the police. Don't try to fix stuff on your own."
"Okay, Mrs. C."
"Okay, Mom." Ava's voice lowered. "We really were just worried about that old man." Mrs. Clark drew back, looking tired but no longer angry. "I'm going to take a shower and wash off the worry." She glanced at her watch. "I think it's past time that you guys got ready for bed. When I come out, I want to see you in bed." Agreeing, the girls went to their suitcases as Ava's mom walked into the bathroom, shutting the door behind her. Ava waited until she heard the shower running before she motioned Carol over.
"What is it?"
asked Carol excitedly.
"Remember how we split up when we went in the bookstore?"
"Yeah,"
nodded Carol.
"of course."
Ava reached into her pocket and pulled out a tattered envelope.
"Is that blood?"
asked Carol.
"Yeah. He must have cut the heck out of himself because he used a jagged piece of glass from the window like a knife blade."
"What do you mean?"
asked Carol, confused.
"When I shut the door, I found the envelope on the back of it with the glass stabbed through it."
Carol's jaw dropped, and she looked at Ava.
"Ouch!"
"Double ouch,"
said Ava. our friend had a really bad evening.
Well,
said Carol hurriedly.
what are you waiting for? Open the envelope.
Ava carefully opened the envelope, dumping the contents onto the bed. A strangely shaped metal ring and a small piece of paper fell onto the comforter. Carol lifted the ring. The metal was smooth, with deep grooves on each side. The decorative face of the ring looked like it had been sliced in half. The body of the ring had strange symbols etched into it. It looked like Egyptian hieroglyphics. The way the ring was made, Carol guessed there was another matching piece that completed or interlocked with the piece she was holding. Carol turned the ring over in her hand.
Okay, smiled Ava. I can see your brain whirring. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking you are missing the second part of this ring. Do you think maybe a piece fell out? Maybe he dropped it in the bookstore.
What do you mean?
Asked Ava as she took the ring from Carol.
You see these grooves and the decorative face? It's made to interlock with another ring. You know, like those best friend necklaces that are like half a heart, and when you put them together, they make a whole heart?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And notice I don't have one, smiled Ava.
That's because I only give them to my best friends.
Oh, said Ava. Funny. Hurtful, but funny.
Well,
said Carol, continuing,
I think this ring is like that. I think it locks together with another piece.
Okay, cool, but honestly, it looks like a cheap piece of jewelry, not risking your life for.
True,
nodded Carol.
Maybe this will answer our question.
Carol unfolded the piece of paper, and her eyes narrowed. Someone had drawn a strange symbol made up of 4 lines with a small circle balancing on the left side.
What does it mean?
Ava whispered to Carol.
I have no idea,
said Carol, studying the symbol.
Any ideas?
An ostrich? A stork standing on one leg.
It looks more like a constellation or zodiac symbol,
said Carol thoughtfully. Ava whipped out her phone and began typing.
Maybe that's what he meant by find Luca, she said excitedly.
However, after a couple of minutes of searching the internet, Ava couldn't find a constellation or zodiac symbol named Luca. Carol stared at the symbol, her brain spinning as she tried to make a connection. But she had to admit, she was stumped. She looked at Ava and shook her head.
I have no idea what it means.
It means, said Ava, smiling, that we need to pay our favorite Italian bookstore another visit.
And you think your mom is going to let you simply waltz over there after her lecture tonight?
Oh, yes. After I convince her how old and delicate the store owner is, and that she has a sick husband, and the store is her livelihood, and that these bad, bad men did so much damage that without our help...
Ava paused, offering a devious smile.
That little old fragile woman needs us,
nodded Carol in agreement.
So, back to the bookstore?
Back to the bookstore,
winked Ava.
If you're enjoying Thomas Lockhaven's audiobook content, please like and subscribe. It's the best way to help out the channel.